So just to kick things off, I'd like to invite my co-panelists to introduce themselves. I'll go last since I'll be the first one to present. So Julia, would you like to kick things off?
Yeah, for sure. So good afternoon or good evening to everybody. My name is Julia Levin. I'm the Knowledge Mobilization Specialist with Research Impact Canada. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Belaskie. I'm the Managing Director at the Canadian Housing Evidence Collaborative at McMaster University in sunny, today, Hamilton, Ontario. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm calling today from the UK. It's 7 p.m. in the evening, so we're kind of winding down for the day. But lovely to meet you all. So my name is Mihaela Gruia. I'm the founder and director of Research Retold. This is a company that I founded in 2017. I'll tell you a little bit more about Research Retold in my presentation. But yeah, nice to be here with you today from the UK. For those of you who just joined us now, if you could take a second to introduce yourself in the chat, that would help the panelists know, who we're presenting to, where are you calling in from today, and what organization are you part of? That would be very helpful. We've heard already in the chat from Stephanie, Helen, and Elise. So those of you who've just joined us now, if you can introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. And then we'll kick things off in just a few seconds. I will be starting the presentations and then Julia will join me, will follow, and then Cynthia. We'll be having space for Q&A at the end of the session. But as we go through the presentations, if anything we say sparks curiosity or a question, feel free to put it in the chat as we go along, and then we'll look through the chat at the end of our talks and answer the questions. So let's see. Hello, Susie. Hello, Mary. Hello, Mary again, Sylvia, and Allison. We also have Rafaela here, Sandra, Lise, Julian. Very diverse audience from different organizations, and it's great to know where everyone's from. Brilliant. Tori, Rafaela. And I think that would be it. I think everyone has introduced themselves, so thank you for doing that. That's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to be starting off, so I'll share my screen now. And then I'll kindly ask you to just let me know in the chat if you can see my screen. If you can hear me okay, just say yes in the chat, that would be great. As you know, we're recording the session, so if you're uncomfortable with that, feel free to turn off your video. Okay, so I'll be kicking off the session today talking about how to create engaging online workshops, how to bring that energy into the room and translate that energy from in-person into the online. So, as I said, a quick introduction about Research Retold, who we are and why we exist as an organization. This is a company that I founded in 2017, and our purpose is to support researchers to engage with stakeholders by making their findings accessible and actionable. So what that looks like in practice is that we take academic papers or research that looks something like this, published in an academic journal, and turn that into visual formats. That could be infographics, policy briefs, visual summaries, a whole range of end products. If you want to know more, I'll be putting my email in the chat after my presentation, and you can reach out individually if you think there's scope for collaboration. I would welcome that. So at the beginning of 2020, I had a lot of plans to travel, and these were some of the locations that I was thinking of I was going to travel to. Predominantly the UK, as I said, we're based in the UK, but I had also high expectations to travel to Canada and Brussels and Berlin, and all of that came crumbling down when we realized that we're not going anywhere, and I'll be basically delivering all of my planned workshops from my home. So Today, I want to basically tell you everything that I've learned in this year and a half of experimenting with turning the in-person workshops into online experiences, right? And I'll be drawing, in particular, drawing inspiration and learning from one collaboration that really stands out as one of the most innovative ways in which we have turned the structure of the in-person workshop into an online experience. So this was a collaboration with McMaster University in Canada, which I didn't get to visit, unfortunately, but which has taught me so much about what an engaging workshop looks like. And I want to basically tell you everything so you can learn from that and get some inspiration, hopefully. So how did I turn what was supposed to be a full day workshop in person? You know, we all know the classic format where you fly someone, you spend a lot of resources on their flight and their accommodation, and then they're there for a full day. Because that was no longer possible, we had to come up with a different format. And what we ended up with, what we collaborated with was this engaging and interactive series with video and live sessions, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a second. So what I'll cover today in my presentation, I'll be talking about specifically about the format and what that looked like, what format and platform I used, elements of interactivity, so all the ideas and elements of interactivity, which I have found to work very well. And I would also welcome some of your contributions. Since we're talking about interactivity, I'll be asking you to share with others what successful interactive ingredients you've seen in online workshops. And finally, I'll cover materials, so supporting materials, what beyond the PowerPoint presentation that you share your screen with, what else can you provide to add value to your participants? So does that all sound good? You can say yes in the chat, that would be great. Yay, thank you, Lise, really appreciate it. Thanks, Cynthia. Okay, so let's kick off with format and platform. So for a bit of context, the starting point of an in-person workshop looked something like this. The topic was supposed to be designing a communications plan for your research, and it was supposed to be structured into 4 different sections: benefits of communicating research beyond academia. I was going to challenge the researchers to do a 60-second exercise talking about their research. Then I would have given them more background and theory around what a communications plan is and how to develop and act on that plan. Now, I asked myself, how could I parcel out or structure the content to create a more dynamic experience? And this isn't something that I came up with on my own, necessarily only on my own. It's something that I had the benefit of collaborating with the McMaster University team. They were very open to thinking of new ideas. And this is where the power of collaboration really comes in handy to just brainstorm interesting ideas of delivering content. So what we came up with was a new format that was going to have 4 components. The first component was going to be a short video introducing the series, the 4 elements that were going to be part of it, the time frame, and any associated tasks that the participants needed to do, videos to watch and things like that. So this was more of an announcing video, but also giving them a little bit of that theory that I mentioned in the beginning around benefits of communicating the research. We then came together in a live session that took about an hour and a half, where they had the opportunity to ask practical questions or any clarifications on the theory from the video, but also it had this practical element of the 60-second exercise, which was going to be the focal point of this live session. We then followed that up with another short video that I pre-recorded on the theoretical component of a communications plan. And then at the end, we had another live session where they could put that into practice concretely. So this is an excerpt from that presentation around, the 5 reasons for communicating the research in a video, then the live session on the central message, again, the video on the theory, and a video on the actual practice and design. So when I say video, just to give you a bit of background information around how did we create this video, what was the process that we went through. first and most important was the script. So having a script, a clear idea of what we were going to say, what I was going to say. We collaborated with the team at McMaster. We got feedback and approval on that script. We filmed 2 to 3 takes and edited that software using free software, but you can, of course, get professional help with that. Again, we got feedback on the video, made a few tweaks to some of the technical details of the series and the timings and things like that, and then implemented the feedback and published that. So when I asked people at the session, what were their thoughts on the preparatory video for the session? These are some of the feedback points that we got. It made them excited to attend. It provided some context for what was to come. It was good reinforcement afterwards. And most importantly, it was very clear, concise, and interesting. So it was a teaser for the session, which really made people excited about the live session. Technically speaking, the platform for these sessions, so the videos were uploaded on the internal server ahead of the session. So it was internally hosted. And then the live sessions happened on Zoom, where I had full control of the session and all the interactivity, which I'll go on to talk about in a second. So because we're talking about interactivity, I want to just take a few minutes to ask you what ideas have you come across that really bring energy in the room? So if you could put that in the chat, what have you found as a participant or as a presenter? What ingredients of interactivity or elements of interactivity have you found to be particularly successful in online workshops? Breakouts with the moderator. Jamboards, yes, for those who don't know what Jamboards are, they're effectively like a whiteboard and you can just collaborate on live. So really give that a go, have a look. A game, yeah, definitely sort of an icebreaker. With groups, develop prompts, so breakout rooms, putting people in groups. Miro board, I'm actually not sure, Helen, what that is. I'll have to look. Mentimeter, I've heard of. It creates different polls and it allows you to engage with your audience. Standing up as I speak in person or recording video gives it much more energy. That is very true. I do actually have a standing desk. I chose to sit down today, but you're absolutely right about standing up as a speaker. It just gives you a bit more energy. You put your body into it. Google Docs for live collaboration. Great idea. For the right group, a dance. Yes, I have to say I did ask for a longer session. I did ask them to get up and move their body a little bit. It went down, I'd say 50% well, 50% not so well. So it's right. You need to just have the right audience in mind so they don't think it's silly or otherwise. Yeah, but otherwise it can work. Shifting between different types of activities, taking breaks, not making sessions too long, and Padlet, similar to cats. Good one. Pets. I must say I haven't used that. Really impressed with Miro, so definitely have to check that out. Brilliant. Well, you brought certainly many ideas that I've come up with and more. So thank you for doing that. I hope everyone found that useful to share that knowledge. Someone mentioned, making these interactive elements quite often. So at least every 10 minutes, you need to have something in there that is interactive. It might seem that it's quite a lot, but actually the experience online is very, very different from in person, where you get your cues from the person. You can see their body language. You can look at the people next to you. Online, you're just in your room on your own. Good use of chat, as I did. Absolutely. So get people involved in the chat is also a good way. So a few ideas from me. Icebreaker polls. Of course, if you are the presenter, you can set these up ahead of time in Zoom, and they can be really effective at just getting people going. And then you can use polls throughout the session just to make sure people are still there with you. Breakout rooms for discussion, absolutely open discussion. So inviting people for a few minutes to just share their thoughts. Exercises prepared. So certainly having some exercises ahead of time to prepare, like I've had the 60-second research message, encouraging, inviting researchers to, or challenging them to present their research in 60 seconds. Another one that was particularly helpful with researchers was using a tool that only contained the 1,000 most used words in the English language and telling them to use that tool to explain what their research was about. And needless to say, got them all very excited, and also is very, very challenging because they wanted to use technical terms. So exercises like that can really get your audience excited, completing a task, getting them to practice something that you've theoretically told them about. So this was the theory about a communications plan, but giving them or allowing time in your session for them to actually practice and not leave the session with the homework to do, because we all know once we end the Zoom meeting, it is much more difficult to gather up and muster up the energy to practice. So giving them, allocating time to practice. Using video, you could break up the session by including some videos or just a different format to get people to see information in a new way. And then lastly, raffles. And I'll share with you after my presentation a link in the chat, but this can get people really excited because you can organize a raffle at the end. You input the names of the participants, and it's just a nice thing to end your session with by offering something to 3 lucky winners. And I'll tell you about how we did that in a second. And lastly, breaks. It's not interactivity per se, but it is so important to do that and to allow for proper breaks. Recently, I've attended a workshop where someone put music during the break, and I thought that was a nice touch. So just putting a bit of background jazz while the break is happening, I thought that was a lovely idea. I really enjoyed it. So after the sessions that I delivered at McMaster University, I asked them, what was your favorite part of the workshop? And of course, people really enjoyed those interactive elements the most. Speaking to different people from different fields. Again, if there's an opportunity to create a bit of that networking environment, that's fantastic. People have been isolated in their homes for a year and a half. The breakout session, practicing, and also participating actively. And finally, we'll go into the final section of my presentation around supporting materials. So how can you add value beyond the presentation that you're sharing with people? Supporting materials help with learning and storing information. And these are a few that I've found to be very helpful. So the first one is a workbook. I'll go into a bit more detail for all of them. A workbook that accompanies your presentation, a recording after the session, a handout that you can send people after the session, and finally a resource in the post. So let's see what I mean by this. So a workbook, this is a snapshot from the 2 workbooks that I had for the 2 sessions for the Canadian workshop. Very, very important that this workbook follows the logic and the structure of the presentation. Otherwise, it can feel too messy, right? So really keep that in mind, that the workbook needs to follow that logic. I created this in PowerPoint in an A4 portrait format. So it's fully editable, which is essential for a workbook. It has space to complete exercises and a place to take notes. So it is a place where people will be taking notes regardless, right? When you do an online workshop. So why not create that experience for them where, they can open that document and have all of their notes in one place. The recording after the session, a few notes about this. Of course, you tell people in advance and they can keep the video off. But one thing I'd like to say is something I've learned throughout the process. I didn't do this for the Canadian University, but I've recently done it for all of our workshops, recent workshops. To edit the video, if possible, and I know this takes a little bit more time, but to edit that video after the session and cut out the fluff. What do I mean by fluff? At the beginning of the session, I was asking you, hello, we're going to wait a few minutes, all of that. If you could just make a condensed, more concentrated version of that recording, I think it will add more value or be more valuable to those who watch it after the event takes place. It's just, in my experience, a much more effective way to get people to watch the recording. So keep that in mind if you can do that. You can use free editing software just to cut those bits that are not interesting. You can host them on YouTube, depends on your internal organization and how you organize things. But in our experience, you can host them on YouTube as unlisted, so no one can find it. You just have a link that you send to those who you think might be interested. And the good thing about this is it can help track views and it provides that long-lasting value right after the event. So just as an example, this is our YouTube channel. And recently we posted a workshop that we delivered it was a 1 hour workshop, but actually the video ended up being just 28 minutes because there was a lot of discussion, a lot of dead time, and there was no point to create a 1 hour video and put it on YouTube. So you can see how many people have viewed it since then, and it is unlisted, as I said. The other option is depends on your organization, but editing, recording, yes, definitely, absolutely do it, because it's just a much more concentrated version. What we did for McMaster is we actually uploaded the whole session, right? So here we have 1 hour and 40 minutes, 1 hour and 24 minutes. I promise you there's time in here that is just fluff, and someone who watches it afterwards might be a bit impatient. And the handout for the session, so in this handout, you can of course include the link to the recording, add a summary of the main ideas, include links from the presentation, and it's a great way to just connect with your participants. Finally, the resource in the post. What do I mean by this? It's truly a pandemic measure, because obviously in person, I would have just given them the guides. So this is a publication that we have for the Research Retold. In the feedback form, I asked them for their address, of course, purely for the purposes of sending them this resource. And I posted it to people at home. It was more time consuming, obviously, but it really added that personal touch, and it made sure that people actually had that extra opportunity to implement the learning from the workshop. So it was really, the foolproof, bulletproof method of them remembering what we had discussed with everything that I've done so far. So that's me. Until now, I'll answer Mary's question at the end, but please follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and I will put the links to all of that I mentioned in the chat in a second. Thank you so much. And now I'll pass the virtual microphone to my colleague, Julia.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to put this into presentation mode for everybody. All right. So thank you, Mihaela. That was a really interesting presentation, and I was excited to learn from you because this, one of the benefits of attending these conferences is you get to meet new people, even if it's virtual. I think it's really exciting, and think about future collaborations. But so I'm going to take over now from Mihaela, and I'm going to talk about leaning into your network to create successful online modules. So as I said, my name is Julia Levin, and I'm the Knowledge Mobilization Specialist with Research Impact Canada. So before I dive into my topic, I just wanted to give a little bit of context as to who are we and what are we doing. So Research Impact Canada, or as we call ourselves, RIC, we are a pan-Canadian network of 20 universities. And this map here just shows you that we have representation from really across the country, from east to west of Canada. And we support research administrators. We create resources and tools to help these institutions provide support to their researchers. And this is a little snapshot of just summarizing the three key basic things that we do at RIC, which is one, we help to build institutional support to encourage collaboration, to connect researchers, policies, and innovations. Number two, we help researchers and partners to demonstrate the impact of their research and excellence. And number three, we help to facilitate a community of practice by developing and sharing best practices, services, and tools. So one of the pieces of work in our portfolio at RIC is that we started using online learning to teach specific skills that are important to knowledge mobilization. And just as a disclaimer, I should say that knowledge mobilization is a term that we use at RIC, but others could also be referring to it as knowledge translation, broader impacts. But today, for the sake of my talk, I'll be talking about knowledge mobilization. So as I said, one of our pieces of work was this. We actually started probably creating this right at the time that the pandemic hit, and our plan was to host this course online, but also have an in-person aspect of it as well. But I think, you know, through this, trying to see the silver lining through all this COVID-ness that's going on, I think that we're really able to reach, you know, a real broad audience by offering this fully for free, openly accessible online. And like I said, so this is just a snapshot of the RIC website, and there's the link there, and I'll put the link in the chat box as well in case you want to visit it afterwards. But the purpose of our course is that it's really supposed to be self-directed. Each module should be able to be standalone and completed in any order at any time. The point is not that somebody comes onto our course and has to take all of the modules in order to get a certificate of completion, but rather that participants should feel that they can go online, see the different you know, portfolio of skills that we're training that we're offering, and just take the module based on the skill that they want to further develop. So the overall purpose of our course is that we hope to train participants with marketable skills to bring directly back to their workplace. We want to provide tools to enable dissemination, uptake, and application of knowledge in an efficient and effective way, and deliver this course to staff working in the skills and training ecosystem. And we hope that this course will allow participants to better connect and communicate their ideas, with the hope that with more people trained in these applicable knowledge mobilization skills, employees and employers can succeed in the labor market. So at this time, we have 2 modules that are currently published on our site. So one is on infographic design, and the other one is on accessible and inclusive events. And I'm sure each of these modules will likely target different audience members, but when thinking about creating the course, we really just thought about an overall target audience, and it's pretty widespread. Our target audience is social innovation researchers and research managers, grant recipients, university staff working in areas related to CANB, including but not limited to those working in research communications, experiential learning, library services, grant facilitators, event planners, and knowledge brokers, as well as community partners, including but not limited to community centers, advocacy groups, and non-governmental organizations, and lastly, also targeting graduate students interested in better maximizing the impact of their research. So when thinking about what are the key considerations for turning research into successful knowledge mobilization online learning, I'm going to just list kind of the 4 key successes that I felt in my experience. And I think if you read the little abstracts for our presentation today, we talked about how the presenters would be from expert to the beginning of creating an online module. And I think at RIC, we're very much in the middle because we just launched 2 of our modules. And so we're just getting started and just getting feedback. But from my experience, the greatest success has been involving partner voices and perspectives from the outset, actively engaging with our audience throughout the planning process. Important to consider the potential of mobilizing this content. And then, of course, to design all of our modules for accessibility and inclusion to ensure that we have the fullest participation for the widest range of attendees. So I realize here I've used a little bit of jargon, but one of the lists under accessibility is AODA, which stands for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, but just ensuring that wherever you're creating your modules for, that you consider the accessibility and inclusivity. We also, for all of our modules, we include a printable transcript so that attendees can print out all of the text that they'll be led through in the module, and so they can follow along. Important to include links to resources for additional learning, because majority of the people that will be taking the course will be taking this on their own time, and there will be no one leading them throughout it, so that there's additional reading if wanted. Ensuring that all the images and illustrations reflect a diverse population, and that all the oral and written text uses non-binary and inclusive language. So talking to Cynthia and Mihaela about the presentation today, and thinking about, I think, what made Cynthia brought this up and what she felt was kind of made our course maybe the most unique that she's seen in her experience, was really how we involved our partner voices and perspectives from the outset, and how we engaged our potential audience in the planning. So something that we did from the very beginning was, even throughout, selecting our module topics, was, we realized that we're really fortunate. We have this really rich network of all different community partners and grant officers working across the country, and those are really our target audience, or at least those people are going to be reaching our target audience. So doing a needs assessment and pulling that population and finding out what type of topics do they want to learn more about, what skills are they interested in further developing. Then, once getting the response from our audience, we then did some background research of our own to see what courses or modules are currently out there, so that we're not reproducing things that have already been done. And then once we were able to narrow in on some skill sets that we wanted to create these modules on, we created a draft version of the module, collaborating with content experts as well as e-learning module experts to help with the creation of that digital aspect of it. And once we had a really good draft version, the next step that we took was we again reached out to our 20 universities from across the country and asked for pilot testers, people who were interested in testing this. And we took a sample of the population. We tried to ensure that we had good representation from across the country, so people from east to west. Also in Canada, we have 2 official languages, so ensuring that we had people, who were English speakers as well as French speakers. And then we had this group each test out the module on their own time. And what we did was we then provided them with a structured feedback form. And to start off, we gave them a little bit of background about what this course was about. And then we asked them kind of 5 main questions. And we asked that they follow this table as they're working through the module. So to think about, how do they feel about the navigation of the module? Were things moving well? How do they feel about the appeal? Did the elements used reflect the brand of our group, the visuals of a diverse population? We then asked for specific comments on content, and this is where people really worked through. We had all of our slides were numbered so that they can list for specifically, which slides there were content issues with, errors that they found, as well as what things did they like about the module. And after, we gave people a few weeks to complete this. After that was done, then as a team, we went back and reflected on this very diverse set of feedback that we got and inputted it into our module. Once the module was then finalized, we launched it on our website. And then what we did was, it was already public and posted, but now instead of, working with perhaps a group of 10 pilot testers, we opened it up to really anybody and everybody in our whole network. And we asked people within our network to invite others who they thought would be interested. And we had a launch of our first module. And we didn't ask people to complete any formal feedback for us, but we gave everyone about 2 weeks to complete the module. And each of our modules really take no more than about an hour to do at home. And then we set out to have a 1-hour meeting where we met with, I think it was over 20 attendees who had done this first module, and we started to get their feedback. We asked them about the interactive. There's an activity that needs to be done with the module, and we got their feedback there. And I think it was really, like Mihaela just said, the power of collaboration. It was really realizing that, this course is only going to be as good as ensuring that we input what people want, because we're not creating this for ourselves, but we're creating it for others. So getting those voices in from the outset and throughout the whole process, I think really helped to lead to our success. Some of the challenges that I would say to creating online learning was, the first one is ensuring that that everything we're creating is easy to understand, because for the most part, people are doing this on their own and there's not a facilitator leading them through it. We want to make sure that it's all very intuitive and easy to walk through. Ensuring that there's a good mix of visuals with content. We know that visuals really increase the accessibility to different audiences, but also, you know, there is importance of having text as well, because there is nobody talking you through. Being aware of barriers to communication, cultural contexts and beliefs, and language barriers. You know, the use of jargon. You know, we're working in this field of knowledge mobilization, and sometimes we can forget, even on this presentation today, you know, I put some words that are very familiar to me, but maybe not to others. So taking a step back and having to remind myself that we want to use very plain language. Considering that there might be some internet access issues for people. And I think that's where having that printable transcript, I hope is a real asset for people who do have internet access issues, where someone can, you know, download the transcript for them, even if they go to the library, and they can download and print it, and then they can just read it through on their own time. Ensuring, you know, that we were creating this course for a really wide audience range, and how do you create a course that meets a wide spectrum of audience members, and this is, you know, still a challenge that I think we work through, but the best way I found to mitigate this challenge was really to involve a widespread pilot testers to ensure that we had representation from different audience members. Ensuring that this course was self-directed. You know, there was always a challenge of getting different content experts to help us along the way, and really ensuring that the modules meet audiences' needs. Then with, you know, whenever I'm thinking about creating new modules, I always try to remind myself that I think people also want, you know, something fast and easy that they can take home with them. So I always try to include tips and tricks. So for me, the top tips and tricks, obviously the number one thing is collaboration and using your network to help you produce these courses and modules, but also to ensure that you're providing clear goals of your course from the very beginning, defining your key message, making sure that the plot is as simple or as complex as you want, remembering that, you know, something complex is not necessarily better. There's lots of really great free image sites that you can use from reliable sources that can help you, you know, showcase a diverse population. So there's sites like Unsplash, Burst, Shopify, Pexels, and Envision. Another thing is, before you even start, to take a step back and define your audience. Who are you creating this content for? And then you'll know how to tailor your information, and then also who to reach out to test out your content to ensure that you've created it appropriately for this audience. When designing your physical course, ensuring that the colors are legible and sensitive to your audience, so thinking about color blindness. You know, ensuring that the fonts are large enough size for people to see. If they're looking at it digitally, they can usually zoom into your fonts and images on the slides, but if they're printing it out, they may not be able to. When you're doing visuals on your content, you want to ensure that there's really no more than 2 to 3 font sizes in it in any design. And like I've said, you really want to portray the diversity of our rich world. So this is our team at Research Impact Canada. You know, couldn't have been obviously successful in this course without, you know, their support, but as well without the support of our, you know, of our larger network. So my contact information is included there, as well as some of our social media handles. And I've put the shortened URL for the course in the chat box. So please feel free to take a look, share it widely with whoever you think is interested. And I'd be happy to welcome any questions after Cynthia's presentation.
Thank you so much, Julia and Mihaela. I will start to share my screen. I've lost my notes page. So we're just gonna, I'm just gonna wing the presentation. which is fine with me. So I'm Cynthia Belaskie from the Canadian Housing Evidence Collaborative, which is a knowledge mobilization and capacity building training hub out of McMaster University. And in thinking about this presentation and working through it with Mihaela and Gruia, I realized I've got to stop using my university language. Mihaela actually was, I think, teasing me about it a little bit. And so I took my cross-sect training, you know, multi-audience, cross-sectoral units in housing title and turned it to this: 3 windows, 1 stone, a surprise experiment and online training, instead of 3 birds, 1 stone, or 2 birds, 1 stone, which is the normal or the normal adage. So again, just starting with a little bit of context here about who we are and how we came to be. Back in 2017, Canada came out with a national housing strategy, which was really the first kind of robust strategy for dealing with the housing crisis in Canada that has ever been developed. And in the housing strategy, there were envelopes of money made available. They're administered by the CMHC, who you see their logo down there at the bottom of the screen. And there were two pockets of money that were especially of interest to academic housing researchers. The one was to develop a network of housing experts to analyze housing challenges. So that's what CHEC is the hub of. We have partner teams across Canada who are both academics and community-based partners who are doing academic research into housing. But then they also had money available to build capacity, because we in Canada do not have the great capacity for doing housing research that you see in other countries, namely the UK and the United States. My supervisor likes to say it's puddle deep and puddle wide. So it is not that really robust academic community. And so there was a call for a grants competition to have a hub for knowledge mobilization and capacity building, and that's where we were successful in being funded. So as I said, we're based at McMaster University. We are a really broad group of players. We have people in housing, we've got people in knowledge mobilization, Research Impact Canada, RIC is one of our members, one of our partners. And we also have partners from across the world. There's over 30 academic co-investigators, and we represent about 2,000 influential policymakers and advisors in the housing sector, as well as government agencies. So our objective is to broker meaningful collaboration, amplify the impact on policy and practices, and a timely, relevant, and rigorous research undertaken by the National Housing Strategy, thematic research projects, and other housing researchers. So we don't sort of draw a strict line there, and quickly grow Canada's capacity to generate that research. So the thing that's really important for today's presentation is this notion of this one objective of ours, which is to build and attract and retain housing researchers. And we wanted to do this in 2 areas. One is with graduate students, and the other is people who are no longer in school, but who are working in the sector. And some sort of wild and weird things happened in Canada where we had a small echelon of housing experts working sort of in the upper levels of government. And then that was moved down to the provincial, or what would be the state government in the US. And so all of a sudden we needed more people who had expertise in housing. And then the provincial government said, well, we don't want to deal with this. So they moved it down to the municipalities. And so now all of a sudden, I think we've got 3,800 municipalities in Canada. And so that means we need at least 3,800 people with housing expertise. And we haven't had any sort of training available to them. So in order to do this, in our original grant application, we had these awesome in-person summer institutes imagined. We were going to do some online course development. We were going to do career reorientation, where you take somebody who's, say, like a great health economist, and you know, sort of indoctrinate them into the housing world and have them do, you know, take those skills they do in health economics and transfer them to the housing realm. And we wanted to have 25 new researchers within 5 years. We also had, you know, speaker series that we wanted to do, conferences, all of these things. And then, you know, this guy comes along, COVID is in the picture, and all of that wonderful online or in-person stuff is stalled. We can't do that. So what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward to make sure we can, you know, come through with the promises that we made to our funder? So it totally messed with our plans, but I think that in the end, it actually made it a lot better. What we decided to do is to work with the experts. There are sort of two groups in arm's reach to check who are really, really good at this online stuff. One you've just heard from, which is Julia and the people at Research Impact Canada. So not only was it in my mandate to make sure that we were teaching graduate students how to do research in housing, but also to teach them how to mobilize that knowledge afterwards. So, or in the process, hopefully they're engaged in knowledge mobilization throughout. So one of the things that we're doing is having our housing scholars, our graduate students, do at least 3 of Julia's online modules in order to count as being a Canadian housing scholar, which I'll get to in a minute. The other is to work with our continuing education unit at McMaster, because they've been doing online education for ages now, and they're really, really good at it. So why would we try and reinvent the wheel? Let's bring this all, you know, to one platform. And we also look to our audiences, and we talk to our audiences, and I won't go into that in detail as Julia just did, but what we heard time and again were from people who were either students currently or people who were now in the industry saying, you know, I would have loved to take a course like this when I was in school. Please, can we get something? Can we make this available? And so we knew, like, we were on the right track, and we thought, let's bring both the academic learners and the industry folks, the non-academics, into one room, in, you know, one virtual room in this continuing education environment, and see if we can make a course that makes sense for everybody. So, the first three windows that we're smashing with this one stone of this one online housing course that we're running through continuing education are graduate students, those folks in government, all of those people who, you know, all of a sudden find themselves in a job in a housing unit that they were not really prepared for in their studies, as well as people working at NGOs, non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, and engaged citizens. One of the really neat things that happened with the National Housing Strategy was that they actually talked to people who are experiencing issues in the current housing system. What we hear from those people who, you know, have lived experience and who are sitting at those tables is that they don't always feel comfortable talking because they don't have the same language. They don't have the same background. They don't know that jargon. They don't, you know, when you say NHS, they don't, you know, like, what is that? Is that like, you know, like NHL, like National Hockey League? Is this a society? You know, like it kind of, it's not part of their daily language. And so this is an opportunity for people like that who may find themselves at those tables to experience, you know, to get some of that experience in a really low risk environment. So then what we started to think about, like, because nobody really wants to do online learning. It's not usually sort of a first course of action for anybody. So we thought, if we're going to attract people to this, we're going to have to make it worth their while. So the first thing that we did was we talked to our partner universities across the country, and we said, hey, if you have graduate students who take this course with us online, could it count as a reading course for you at your institution? Would you agree to be the supervisor for these folks who want to take the course, so that maybe they have to write an additional essay, a lit review, or an analysis. But by and large, the bulk of the work would be done in this online course. And everybody said, yes, please. We are dying for this sort of thing. I need research assistants who can get out there and do this work, and I don't have time to train them all on our own. Or I don't have enough students to make a whole course. And I don't have the capacity, I don't have the time running this big research program to also be teaching a bunch of one-off courses to individuals. So if they can get the content from you, do a little bit extra with me, that's great. And then, then we looked at it and we said, whoa, we can't have these folks paying, paying tuition to their institutions and then coming to McMaster and paying tuition as well. So what are we going to do? We decided to earmark some of our money to have these things that we're calling Canadian Housing Scholars. And what that does is it gives them a nice title. They have access to a business card and that sort of thing. But then they also get their tuition to the course for free. They do, as a requirement to be called a Canadian Housing Scholar, they do have to do 3 of the Research Impact Canada modules online. And I'm hoping that 3 is just a little taster and then they want to do the entire course. The other neat thing that people get, we worked with one of our partners, which is the Chartered Institutes of Housing Canada. This is an international organization. I think they have, they represent members in 30 countries across the world, and they have accreditation. They have both chartered members and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but anyhow, so ideally, you do 3 to 5 courses and you get it through CIH courses. It's a housing organization for housing professionals, and you get your accreditation, and then you get to hold that for life. And so we said, hey, CIH, you don't have this kind of academic course that we're offering. What do you think? Could we work something out where if learners take a course with us, it might count towards accreditation with you? And they said, yes, please. We don't want to be doing this on our own. So they handed us, their guidebook to all of the things that their courses have to entail. Our course meets and exceeds that. And so now the graduate students who are now getting it for course credit, also, if they decide to continue on in housing in their profession, they're already 1 course into a CIH accreditation. So that's pretty neat. The other thing, as well as those folks from the NGOs or the government or whoever else are taking it, also get that credit towards their accreditation with CIH. The other neat thing is our Center for Continuing Education at McMaster said, well, we have these things called certificates of professional learning. You take 3 courses in a particular topic and you get the certificate. It's not quite as intensive as some of the other larger credentials. And so they said, if you're going to do 1 course, do you think you could come up with 3 and we could offer a certificate of professional learning? And so I went back to our colleagues across Canada and said, do you folks think you can come up with enough material? And they all said a resounding yes. So there's sort of the second set of 3 windows that we're smashing with this 1 course, and then the other 2 courses that will follow afterwards. The other bonuses for our instructors, they have the opportunity to do a mixed model of synchronous and asynchronous teaching. So it's more bang for their buck, right? They can record some material and have it in subsequent sessions that this course runs, and they're not having to constantly, switch platforms. Right now, one of our instructors is doing the course simultaneously at 3 different universities. Or 3 different organizations, sorry, not universities. Some wanted a 3-day session, some wanted a 2-day session, some wanted a 12-week, 1-hour session each time. So he's, working on all these different platforms, and it's just, he's basically working for less than minimum wage because he has to keep adapting his material. Now that's not going to be an issue. One other thing I wanted to say, I mentioned those community partners who would be, who have the option of working or of doing the course. We've also worked to have a sliding scale for the cost of our tuition for the course. So if you're in government or, with a private organization, you're going to pay the full $850. If that's not the case that you're in, say you're an undergraduate student, you can't really apply to be that Canadian Housing Scholar, you can take we can slide the scale down to what is affordable for you. And that was really important to our team, because we all of a sudden saw this as an opportunity to make this learning accessible. And so we really wanted to jump on that. It's going to launch in September 2021. Do we know if it'll work? I don't know if it'll work. We certainly don't want to get rid of all of our in-person opportunities to learn and teach and network, but we definitely feel that, oh my goodness, I think homeschooling has gone downhill in the background. Sorry, guys. We don't want to give up the opportunity to do that in-person learning and that in-person networking, but we think that this is definitely something that's going to stick around. And that's all for me.
Thank you so much. We've got 4 minutes left for questions. Thank you, Cynthia and Julia. So 2 questions that popped up. So Mary said, what do you recommend for simple editing software? I'm just gonna put a little answer now in the chat. So for Mac users, this is free software. So we use iMovie a lot. Again, just for basic, simple editing where you just cut out things. Video editor for Windows 10, InShot for mobile video editing. And then there was a question again from Mary to Julia. How many hours of work went into your project?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say it took a few. I haven't exactly tracked the time, but I would say it took a few months to go from beginning to end, and then to also remember that creating this course is just one of the parts of my job. So I'm doing it in addition to some other projects as well. But I do want to say it probably took about 6 months for the course for one module, 1 or 2 modules, I think it was, to get from start to completion.